All right, moving along. Here's my next one. Okay, can you please discuss this question? If we all came off the same boat, how do we have different features now? So, all came from Noah off the same boat.
Yeah. Exactly.
How do we have the races and the heights and the colors and all the stuff?
Exactly. That has to do with genetics, and so when you're looking at the way that you get different types of people. Actually, let's just use animals. So when you're talking about dogs, all dogs came from a wolf-like creature. Okay, and so if not from wolves, and so either wolves and dogs come from a common ancestor, or dogs come from wolves specifically. And they've probably done some genetic studies on this, and I just haven't read them. But all dogs came from a wolf-like creature. And so when you're looking at dog breeds, you've got everything from Great Danes and Mastiffs down to Shih Tzus and Chihuahuas.
Are those really dogs, though?
Yeah. Are they really dogs? Yeah. And so how do you do that? How does that happen? And what's going on there is within the dog kind, and that's how the Bible pictures the animal kingdom. These animals were all created after their kind. And so you would have the dog kind that would include wolves and dogs, and also hyenas and other dog-like creatures. And within the dog kind that came off the boat, and so you didn't have to have hyenas and wolves and coyotes and Labrador retrievers and mastiffs, and nobody would take a Shih Tzu and put it on the ark. And just, they just wouldn't do that. So anyway, you don't have to have all those animals on. You have to have a dog kind of animal that's on there that has the genome that has the information for all these different breeds of canids, basically, and or dogs, and so that's what came off the ark. And then what they do in breeding is they take animals and they look for certain characteristics in a dog, for example. And so if I want a dog that's smaller, obviously I'm going to take two of the smallest dogs in a litter, and I'm going to breed them together to try to get a smaller dog. Then you take the smallest dog in that litter and you breed it with another dog, a little bit further off, so that you get smaller and smaller. This is how you get these different size dogs, and it's also how you get the different shapes of their faces. When, for example, when you're talking about a bulldog versus a German Shepherd, for example, with a muzzle. You're looking for shorter muzzled animals to breed with shorter muzzled animals, and that's how you're going to get this. Okay, so one of the things that ends up happening when you do this is you are losing information the more you breed an animal for certain characteristics. And so when you're talking about Great Danes versus Chihuahuas, for example, Chihuahuas do not have the information in their genome anymore to get you a Great Dane. And Great Danes are on the other end of that spectrum, and they don't have the information to get you a Chihuahua because it's been bred out of them. And so any time that you're getting certain characteristics in an animal, and those characteristics get further and further from the original kind, you are losing information. You're not gaining information. You're losing it. And so you can breed an animal to the point where you can't get back to the original dog kind, for example. But if you were able to take small dogs and very large dogs and breed them together, what you're going to do is you're going to take some of the genes that the small dogs do not have anymore, and some of the genes that the large dogs do not have anymore, and you're going to get back towards that kind, that original dog kind. And so when you're looking at dog breeds, for example, I like Labrador retrievers, but they have problems genetically, and so they have hip issues, and the bigger dogs have lifespan issues, and the smaller dogs have longer lives, and that kind of stuff, and that has to do with what's been bred out of the animal at that point. Well, you got exactly the same thing with humans. And so when you're talking about humans, you have people who are on the far end of the spectrum. So, for example, in humanity, when you're talking about white people versus black people, for example, we are on opposite ends of the genetic spectrum. And so you don't have in a group of white people the genome to get black people anymore. What you're going to get is white people. And in black people, you don't have, generally speaking, the genome to get white people anymore. They're on the opposite ends of the spectrum. And so, you're talking about Great Danes versus Chihuahuas again. But if you take those two racially disparate peoples and you start interbreeding them, then what you're going to get is children that look more like the original kind that came off the ark, which happens to be people who are medium brown toned skin. And so when you look at humans who have medium brown skin, they have the genome that actually has, and I'm just right now talking about color genome, that has the characteristics where you can get black people and white people. And the way that you draw that out is by taking a small group of medium brown skinned people and you have them intermarry. And when that happens, the genome starts getting expressed in ways that you don't have when you have a large group of brown people who are intermarrying. And so the distinctions start coming out. And so, for example, in India, a lot of, and I'm India, over in Asia, a lot of people groups are closely related and they are medium brown skin. And so in the same family, literally brothers and sisters, you can have kids that have white skin and radically black skin in the same family because of the family characteristics and who they're married to and that kind of stuff. And so that's what was happening when they got off the ark. When you have people getting onto the ark, you're going to have people who have basically a full set of genes. And so Noah and his family would have been medium brown skinned people. You would have exactly the same thing with Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve were not white and blonde, and they were not black and brown eyed. They were somewhere in between that, and that's where you get all the different people groups that can come from there. And so you would have to have exactly the same thing with Noah and his family. And where the people groups started splitting off and becoming disparate races, what we would call races. Race is not in the Bible. You don't have that. You have families in the Bible. And so Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And so you have Shemites. So anti-Semitic comes from Shem. They're Semitic peoples come from the family of Shem. And you have Japhethites. And so Japhethites are basically people groups that, generally speaking, are Indo-European. Well, not Indo-European, but Greek and European and that kind of thing. And then you have Hamitic peoples. And so the Hamitic peoples can be some of the peoples in the Middle East and in the Far East and also in Africa. And what happened at the Tower of Babel, when they got off the ark, you had a family that was intermarrying with itself, and then that family grew and grew and grew, and you would start having a large population, and that large population would be all of medium brown skin type people, right? Then what happened is God confused the languages, and when he confused the languages, you had a situation where now people don't understand each other. Now you have smaller people groups that are based on language, and so obviously they would tend to live together, and so obviously they would intermarry, and now you have small groups of people that can express what's in the genome. And so then you're going to start having a situation where different facial characteristics start coming out and different color characteristics start coming out, height and shortness and all of that, those kinds of characteristics are going to start coming out. And so you're going to have people marrying people because we kind of like to marry people that look like us. And so Matt Lewis
I don't.
is 6'8". He did not marry a 5-foot woman. and so his children are going to be taller, for example, than my children are. And so I'm 6 foot, and my wife is 5'2", and my tallest child is 5'8", maybe 5'9". He might be 5'9". And so that's the way that kind of thing works. And so when you have that going on, then on top of it, you're gonna have situations where people are in different environmental areas, and so people with longer noses tend to be able to live better in colder areas. It's really interesting. People with shorter noses tend to be able to live better in tropical areas.
Why in the world would that be?
It's just because of the way that the air gets filtered through your nose and
really?
how it cools off or how it heats up and
wow, I never heard
kind
that
of
before.
stuff. You got the same thing with skin color, and so I can tan pretty well. My wife is very fair skinned, so is my son. So me and my daughter tan about the same. But my wife and son, my son goes out in the sun and he just gets red.
Yeah.
And so he would not live well in a tropical area. It would not be good for him.
Yeah.
And he would die off from melanoma and that kind of thing, where it would be different in other areas. And so, you've got some of that going on. And so this is where you get what we call the races. But they're actually people who are from different family groups, and they've just been, the genome has been isolated at different places. Now, one more thing before I let you go on this. Sorry for all the science on this stuff, but one of the things that you have with Noah and Adam specifically is they're closer to the creation of mankind. And so the genome that God created when he created Adam and Eve was perfect. And then sin enters in and starts degrading the genome. And so we have mutations that start entering in. And again, mutations are things that cause the destruction of parts of the genome. And so you lose information over time. And so when Adam and Eve have children, obviously those children have to be marrying each other. And so you're going to have brothers marrying sisters and that kind of stuff. And obviously you have the same thing with Noah and his family. You're going to have cousins marrying each other and in that situation, but they were closer to a perfect genome at that point. When you start getting into situations where you have small people groups that are intermarrying, there's going to be more opportunity for expressions of negative genetic stuff, and there are going to be problems that take place there. And especially as time goes on and more radiation gets filtered through the genome and you have more mutations and that kind of thing going on. And so what happens over time is you have to be marrying somebody who is further and further away from your genetic makeup. Otherwise, you're going to have problems. And so that's why the Bible did not condemn the marrying of a brother and a sister, for example, in the book of Genesis. But by the time you get to Leviticus, God does an absolute prohibition on that. Because you're further into time here, and the mutation rates have accelerated, and people's genome is degraded enough that that can cause problems. And so you start seeing restrictions as far as who you marry. So, but basically, that's it. There you go.
There you go.
And so, again, the Bible doesn't teach races. The Bible teaches families. And those family groups, you can be from the same family group. Basically, there's 3 different family groups that came off the ark: the Hamites and the Japhethites and the Shemites. And that continues to be a great description of the family groups that you have on the planet. And even within those family groups, you have some different expressions of what people look like, even within those family groups. And that all has to do with genetics.